What's up, guys? We're on the Weightlifting Scoop, and we're back in America. So I'm so happy to be home. Had a great time, but I have to say I am exhausted. Got Matt Bergeron with me today.
How's it going, guys?
They can't hear you yet. We're not live. No, I'm just kidding. What's going on, Matt? How's your training going?
It's been going. Hit a little rough spot, just some super tight and sore muscles, but it's at a point when we're just kind of taking a little break, so it's not too critically upsetting.
Yeah, so we're 12 weeks out from the American Open. I'm only 5 weeks out from Worlds, so I got to get going.
Gotta wake up. You've been sleepy all day.
Yeah, so if anybody out there has gone through a time zone change, it is crazy. Sydney is 14-hour time difference from Charlotte. They said something like if you drill a hole through the earth from Charlotte, the closest place you'll end out to is like somewhere in Australia on the East Coast. I mean, I've never experienced a time zone change like this. I guess one other time I went to Taiwan, but I don't know. I'm not that old, but geez.
It's not your age or anything like that. I took a couple trips over to Europe, and that's only, I think, maybe like 5 hours difference, and that took it out of me. So 14 hours,
Yeah, so then 10 days from now, gonna go to the OTC, which I'm really excited about that because you got Donovan Ford, D'Angelo Osario, and hopefully some of the guys from the world team. I know we're having a camp out there, but that's a time change. And then I'm gonna go to Poland for Worlds 10 days after that. So, I mean, time change after time change. I'm gonna be a hell of a traveler by the end of this year, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. I mean, it's great.
At least you're gonna get prepared for any more possible travel you have in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of D'Angelo Osario at the Caffeine and Kilos meet, my gosh. He had 160 in the snatch locked out overhead and clean jerked 195. That kid's coming around. He's going to be a contender in the 94 weight class, like, maybe a little faster than people expected. So, he's already hitting a 350.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's really good.
Yeah, that kid's incredible. Ian Wilson, 165. I mean, I don't know how old he is now. I think he's only 19, so he's got 2 years to break these records over and over. I guess the current records are 165 165 and 200 held by Casey Bergner. They've been there for a while, but Ian Wilson, man, kid's a freak. So we got to step our game up.
Yeah, we'll catch up.
They're making me feel old, like I'm the old dog and got the young guys biting at my heels, and Mike Nakula in my weight class, he's about to graduate, and so it's going to be fun. I think USA Weightlifting has a lot of young talent. There's tons of people I didn't even name, the Barnes brothers, all that. But anyways, excited to be home. We put on a series of seminars. We had like 7 seminars, and 4 of them were 2-day seminars. But the first day is where everyone goes heavy on the level 1 seminar. Teaching people technique, fixing their technique, having them max out. 250 plus PRs in 3 weeks. It's a lot of PRs. Like, I'm pretty impressed with that number. And it wasn't just beginner lifters. Some people were beginners, but there were some fairly advanced lifters snatching over. A lot of people snatching over 110. Some snatching over 130 to make PRs. I mean, weightlifting in Australia is getting pretty popular.
Yeah, CrossFit's pretty popular down there, isn't it?
Yeah, CrossFit's coming along. They don't have as many sports in high schools, so CrossFit is really kind of able to capture a good bit of the market, just in terms of like people who want to do athletics.
That's good. That's good. That's still thinking about 250 PRs. Just that's insane for 7 seminars. Yeah,
so I mean that's at least 250 kilos of PRs because each person PR'd by at least a kilo. So it's not 250 different people PRing, but it's probably like 200 people PRing, and then and then a couple people making 2 or 3 PRs. But either way, I mean, probably, I would venture out to guess some people. This one kid made a 21 kilo PR in the clean.
Oof.
I was like, dude, if you're hitting a 21 kilo PR, it's time to start going heavier more often.
Yeah, he's been, I wouldn't say slacking off, but just not knowing how to go heavy, probably.
Yeah, I mean, he was relatively new, but it wasn't a shabby weight either. I mean, we're talking like 141 or 142 in the clean.
Nice.
Yeah, I told that kid he definitely needs to pursue weightlifting. I wish I could remember his name. I'm like the worst with names, but
if you're out there listening, yell at Travis through his Facebook.
Yeah, we had it's actually amazing, realizing kind of how much of an impact like the Old Cow Strength team and our MDUSA team has, not only within the U.S. but internationally. I mean, we were in Australia and people were like, "I learned how to lift by watching y'all's videos."
That's awesome.
Or the old the cow strength progressions that Glenn put up. I mean, that's crazy.
That's insane to know that people are watching us outside of this country.
Yeah, I mean, it's really like, I mean, yeah, I can't even express like how crazy that is.
So, other than the seminars and crushing PRs, how was Australia? See some cool stuff down there?
Yeah, so Ben Tiley and Simone Tiley, they're the owners of Muscle Driver Australia, and they were great hosts. They cooked us food every night or bought us food every night, and like good food. And I got to do some cool things. Like, before I went to Australia, I've seen kangaroos my entire life, and I've always wanted to see one. And as far as I was concerned, they're like unicorns. Like, do they exist? Do they not exist?
Just a bunch of Photoshop on the internet.
Really, I mean, honestly, because we've never seen them. It's like a very exotic thing for an American to see a kangaroo in real life. So I told everybody that. They got a good kick out of it. But I got to feed a kangaroo, pet him, put my arm around him. I got a picture on Facebook. I got a picture on the Weightlifting Scoop Facebook page with Glenn. He's feeding like 3 kangaroos at one time. He had like the kangaroo food, and they were all surrounding him. So
yeah, he's just teasing them all. Treats.
Yeah, they were tame kangaroos. It was like a reptile park, and so like they were just loose. I mean, you were allowed to go right up to them, pet them, feed them, and they were very friendly.
Was there like, I forget, I think I've seen the picture, but I forget, was there like a fence or anything, or could they just wander around and do stuff?
Well, there was a fence, but I mean, it was a huge space, so there was a ton of room for them to run around. It wasn't like a backyard. It was like, there was a fence, but it was a huge area for them to kind of wander around. And they knew the deal. They knew that the humans fed them, and so we got there early. And they knew what the deal was. As soon as they saw the little brown bags that we had the food in, they came up to us, and they were all nice, trying to like, shake our hands and let us pet them. And then they knew we'd give them some food. So, yeah. And then I feel bad saying this after I talk about being nice to the kangaroos, but I also got to eat kangaroo. So, kangaroo is damn good.
It is good. We had a place back in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I used to live, called Jungle Gyms.
Really? They have kangaroo in Cincinnati?
Yeah, it's like it's an international supermarket. It's really huge. Like, you can go in there and you can get anything from any country in the world. And me and my buddies one day, we got kangaroo, alligator, horse. Sorry for all you equestrians out there, but horse is pretty good.
Yeah, no, I love what do you call those supermarkets? The international supermarkets. I love those. In Atlanta, there's a Chinatown and they have everything. And honestly, I was a pretty simple eater, but some friends in Atlanta, they kind of like rubbed off on me, and I love to eat a lot of Asian food, and I'll try anything. I'll eat Indian food, all that kind of stuff. Now I'll try it once. can't guarantee that I'll like it, but, I found some good things.
You gotta try it at least once. Try different food at least once.
Yeah. The kangaroo, it was like a kangaroo fillet on sweet potato puree.
Oh, man, that sounds good.
I mean, it was like this crazy, super legit paleo meal. Very, very good. You had like little mandarin orange slices and beet slices on the outside. But, I mean, it doesn't sound that appealing, but the way they cooked it was a very nice restaurant. It was incredible. Like, one of the best things I've ever eaten. Definitely rivaled any steak I've ever had. I'm sure not every kangaroo is that good because that was a very nice restaurant. So, yeah. What kind of kangaroo did you kind of have like hamburger patties or?
Yeah, we got both like hamburger patties and we got just some, I guess they'd be comparable to New York strips.
Yeah.
Just some simple steaks, and I mean it's still like kind of game meat, so you gotta know how to cook it right, but
yeah, the one thing they said is that you have to cook it fairly rare. So you have to kind of know how to cook, because as soon as you overcook it a little bit, it's very tough and dry and gross. But if you're able to cook it real well, then yeah, I mean, it's worth eating. But I'm sure even if you can get it in the U.S., which obviously you can, I'm sure it's super expensive. I mean, probably not that affordable to eat on a regular basis. But
no, yeah, it's probably just a once in a while deal.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was probably a once in a lifetime thing.
Until the next time you go down to Australia.
Yeah, who knows? That may be the only time. I got to be honest. I probably would have never made it to Australia if it hadn't have been for this series of seminars. And the reason for that is, like, Australia is very expensive. I mean, it costs over $2,000 just to get there in economy.
Man, so well, I know we talked about this before, but things like food is expensive just because a lot of it has to be
I think
imported.
Just everything is more expensive. Even minimum wage for them is more expensive, so everything's just inflated. But the Australian dollar and the U.S. dollar are approximately the same, in the same ballpark, 90% to 100%, the same, on a regular basis. So, in that respect, it's like if you live in Australia, things don't seem all that expensive because your salary is inflated in comparison to what it is here. However, if you're traveling from the U.S. to Australia, I mean, it's just crazy how expensive everything is. I mean, say like coffee, for instance, it's like $5, whereas like the typical regular cup of coffee at Starbucks would be, what, $2.15 or something?
Yeah, $2, $3 maybe.
So at gas stations, here was the crazy thing, is that a candy bar was like $3.
Like a Hershey bar and like a Babe Ruth and all that?
Yeah, just like a Twix or something. So I don't even see why people eat the candy bars there because they're so expensive. It's like, I don't know. It was just, I think the only thing that was less than $2 was M&M's.
That's just because M&M's are good. You can't overcharge M&M's. No one, it's like, I can't even compare that. That's just a crime.
Yeah, I mean, you would think so, but anyways, you got the opportunity to go to Ball State, and so you have a master's degree from Ball State, correct?
Yeah, I've got my undergrad in applied exercise science, and my master's is in sports performance. So pretty much just making athletes better at what they do.
So you got a chance to go up there and give a couple lectures and kind of like how you're applying it and how weightlifting differs from what you learned in the textbook, right?
Yeah, I went back and talked to a couple classes about, how I use my degree and how I got to where I am right now. And my basic message was, think outside the box and take risks. Because a lot of the stuff I learned in the textbooks, at least for what we reference here in the U.S., is a lot of aerobic-based research. So, like, doing a lot of sets of 10 to 20 reps if you're using weight at all, or doing bike work, doing blood work, muscle biopsies, all based on aerobic research and exercise. And when I first started getting into weightlifting and I wanted to catch up and actually start being a little competitive, I had to realize like, okay, this is all training on a bike, but I'm not training on a bike or training to run far. I'm training to pick up heavy weight. And that's where I just had to start looking at different people's point of views, some new research or theories, and that's pretty much how the sports performance program at Ball State is not just teaching you how to train athletes, or depending on what part of it you're in. I was in the strength and conditioning side of training athletes, but it was just learning how to learn and how to research.
Well, a lot of things you learn are theory in a textbook, or at least research is kind of like old school.
Yeah.
So to be on the cutting edge of things, you kind of have to go against the grain a little bit and try it out, and sometimes it works, and you can't really explain why, because sometimes training methods are ahead of what's actually been studied in a controlled environment.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what me and one of the guys back there we had some back and forth email conversations / debates, and just talking about things. And like one of the newest issues out there is icing versus not icing for injuries. And, I talked to my chiropractor, my, doctor here down in South Carolina, and I've talked to a bunch of athletic trainers and people, and it's still kind of controversial just because I think there's a video with Kelly Starlett talking about not icing because of the body's physiological reaction to injury is to, have swelling and all that stuff. So it's a good thing. And it is a good thing. If you're injured, you want that to happen.
Allow that inflammation to actually take place. So that kind of, that makes sense in theory to a certain extent.
Yeah. But then it's like, say you're dealing with a gymnast or a pitcher who has constant issues with their shoulders, legs, whatever it is, that just have this chronic injury issue, and they're not icing, then, you gotta do something different, and that's where icing comes in, and it seems to help. Both sides seem to help. It just depends on the situation.
Yeah, I mean, the way he explains it is like the flossing bands, and, I get that. Now I know one time, I had tendonitis where I would cry when I squatted. I was about, like 17, 18. It was first year in college, so I was 18. And I mean, if I didn't ice, I would be crying at night. I'd be crying during my squats. So, I mean, quite literally, I had tendonitis that was that bad. There was probably like something really wrong, to be honest with you. But point being, ice really got me through that time. And like, what helped me the most was the cold plunge. When I moved out to the OTC, I cold plunged every day for like 2 weeks. And then my tendonitis went away and my body felt great. So I don't believe that cold water doesn't do anything. Like, I just don't believe that. I do think that you can overdo it, though.
Yeah, it's really a matter of what the situation is, how far along the issue is. So if it's like pretty recent injury or recent injury issue, then maybe you should just let the body do its thing. But if it doesn't go away after like a week, then you should probably start icing just a little bit, just see what happens.
And then ibuprofen is probably another controversial topic in the same area. So,
oh, yeah.
So ice, ibuprofen, all that stuff. And, whatever, to each their own. But yeah, so that's pretty cool. You got to speak to a couple classes, let them know how our team operates versus, what you may learn in a textbook.
Yeah, I showed them for a little speech I was doing. I pulled up the Muscle Driver website, showed the videos of us training, and they were really into it. It's a lot different than what I got when I was in those classes. Like saying, like people come in like, oh, I'm a PT and stuff, and I had to tell them like, you're probably not going to be a professional athlete or something like that, but you can do some really cool stuff if you think outside the box and start applying what you're learning.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, that many more people now have seen a snatch and clean and jerk, so maybe their kids will get interested in it. I don't know, even if they don't. But you never know.
Yeah, it was funny how many kids didn't know what a snatch or clean and jerk was.
Yeah, in some countries, most everyone does kind of know what a snatch and clean jerk is, because when you talk about weightlifting, you're not automatically going to assume weight training, like, bench press, curls, stuff like that. Or powerlifting. Powerlifting isn't as big or broad. But anyways, I've been writing kind of a series of blogs on the website, theweightliftingscoop.com, and it's called The Scoop on Weightlifting, and it kind of goes through a few things that we've talked about in previous podcasts. It kind of is going to link back to how to coach certain level athletes, so it's going to be through September, might even bleed into October. But right now I got 3 of the articles up. And a lot of this has been, obviously I've gone to like a ton of Glenn's seminars, and I've been around weightlifting for a long time. So I've kind of picked up a lot of different things, and specifically with Glenn's seminar, the biggest thing that I never really considered is that culture truly affects how people have built programs. And since the Bulgarians and the Soviet Russians train so differently, are the sets and reps really all that important? Or is it important that you retain a lifter within your country and use culture to continue to keep the lifter in the program?
It's a pretty interesting question, just because a lot of people, at least when I read forums or go on YouTube or whatever and see training videos, people ask a lot of questions like, what are they doing? Bulgarian system? Are they doing Smolov? Russian squat cycle? All these different things, and it's interesting because then there's, Chinese programs are getting big now because of their success in weightlifting, and it's really kind of a question of what works for us as Americans.
But look, I trained with a coach when I was younger. I trained at the OTC. I trained at LSUS. I trained here at MDUSA, and we all did different stuff. That's within the U.S. I've observed at the OTC, actually, the Iranian junior weightlifting team, which actually included Salimi, current, world Olympic champion, world record holder. He was part of the Iranian junior team back then in 2008. And I saw him train. And also there was a lifter. He's now 105. He got third at the Olympics. His name's Nawab. I don't know his last name. But point being, I saw those guys train, and they trained very Bulgarian. It was very much like snatch, clean, jerk, heavy. They were also training for a competition within a month and a half of the competition. So naturally, you're going to be lifting heavier anyways. But from speaking to them, it was pretty Bulgarian. And then on the other hand, I've seen Eduardo Edmond. I don't know how to say his name exactly, but he's kind of like the YouTube celebrity from, what is the country down there in South America? Central America. It's not Guatemala or Venezuela. Ecuador. It's Ecuador. Yeah, Eduardo from Ecuador. So he's kind of like the YouTube star. You've probably seen him. He's a 94. Snatch is like 170. Clean jerk's like 205 or so. Incredible squatter. The point being, he trains a lot different than the Iranians did. He started every single session with drop snatches, up to like 150 to 170, every single session. I got obsessed with this guy because he's such a great weightlifter. When I went back home and I wasn't training the OTC anymore, I decided to move back home. I started doing that. I was like doing drop snatches before every training session because that's what he did. But I could tell you within the U.S., how Norik Vardanian trained, Kendrick trained. Totally different. How all these guys train, they're high-level international weightlifters. They all train differently. But at the end of the day, what matters is how long you train, in time of years.
Yeah.
The people who get good are the ones who stay in it for like 10 years. It doesn't happen overnight.
No, yeah, it's when trying to describe weightlifting to people, for me, people ask like, how do you train and practice? And the best way I can explain it is it's both at the same time. Because especially when you're doing workouts that involve the snatch and clean jerk, you're practicing with heavier weights. And sometimes it's about getting as much weight as you can, and sometimes just getting as good as you can, as consistent as you can at different percentages or rep schemes and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of at my brief looking at different international programs, just kind of what I recognize as a consistent thing is just being able to practice the lifts throughout the whole training scheme. whether it's Chinese, Russian, Iranian, and all that kind of stuff.
Hey, but look, all right. So if you go into if you look at the broad range of just fitness, the fitness industry.
Yeah.
You go into a commercial gym, you might see somebody doing curls. You might see someone doing tricep extensions. You might see someone doing bench press. You might see someone doing treadmill work, rowing, the good girl, bad girl machine, or naughty girl machine. You know, the one where you're opening up your legs, spreading them, closing them.
The weekend leg machine and the weekday leg machine.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you want to call that machine. I mean, you'll see people doing all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah.
There's a ton of exercises within weight training or athletic training, right?
Yeah.
There are tons of different methods, sprint work, this and that. But if you go into a weightlifting gym, whether they're doing Bulgarian programs, Soviet programming, their own programming, you know, I hate when people say, oh, I do Bulgarian or whatever. You're just training.
Yeah.
But the point being is you're going to be doing some variation of snatch, clean, jerk, or squat. In some pulls, because I would argue that if you know, the way you intuitively come up with pulls is you miss some weights or clark some weights and you say, hey, I need to lift some heavier weight off the floor so I get confidence. You know, that's a variation of the snatch or the clean, you know. And then if you're doing sets of 3, you're still doing snatches. So the person who's maxing out or doing sets of 3 at 80%, they're still doing snatches.
Yeah, you're still doing the movement.
If you're doing push presses, that's a variation of the jerk, you know. Anyways, my point is if you're in a weightlifting gym, you're not going to see people doing tricep extensions or whatever, you know, unless it's a very small portion of their training just for injury prevention or rehab, prehab. But, I mean, in the broad range of things, weightlifters in general, even on opposite ends of the weightlifting spectrum, are in a very small part of weight training or athletic training.
Yeah, it's just trying to think of the best way to describe it is we don't really do a lot of auxiliary work in our training program specifically.
Yeah.
We just do a variation of everything. It's variation of snatch, clean and jerk, and that's about it. We don't do a lot of, well, at least what Glenn programs for us, we don't do a lot of other variations of presses. We don't do a lot of pull-ups. We don't do other hip accessory work like glute ham raises, reverse hypers, all that stuff. It's just really practicing the movement.
Yeah, in most programs, I mean, even if you look at a program like LSUS or something that has a lot of volume in it, you know, they do more high volume strength work, but they still always on Saturday do the lifts. You know, they're always at least one day a week going pretty heavy on the lifts. And they also they have a couple days where they're doing very high volume snatches from the hang. So yeah, they might be doing sets of 5 from the hip, but at the end of the day, that's a snatch variation. It's working the same thing. You know, so it is on opposite ends of the weightlifting spectrum, but if you work hard in both of those programs, you're going to make progress, you know?
Yeah, it's really like any other sport you can find out there, regardless of what, you know, coaching program it is, if it's baseball or football, soccer, whatever it is, you're not going to get better unless you're practicing the movement, you're practicing the sport itself.
I mean, and getting stronger, obviously, because strength is a part of it. So,
but if you have a good training program, you're going to try and put more and more heavy weight on there. So,
right. I mean, you want to get strong for the snatch and the clean specifically.
Yeah.
Anyway, so kind of the last article or blog that I wrote was weightlifting is intuitive. And kind of the point of this is I kind of got this idea from something that a few different people have told me similar circumstances in the past. John Bros talked about something similar, so maybe give him a little credit for sparking this idea. But if you were kidnapped and thrown on a deserted island, and basically all that was there was a tent for you to sleep in, a platform and weights for you to lift, a TV with snatches going on replay, right?
Yeah.
So you knew nothing about weightlifting, so that's why the TV is important, to show you what a snatch is. And then there's food for 12 weeks. And you're told that you need to snatch X number weight, right? So, you know, whatever weight that is, you're told that you have to snatch that, and you only have 12 weeks of food, and you're only going to be rescued if you snatch that weight. So basically, you're going to run out of food and die at a certain point. You're not going to be able to, like, make that much progress after you run out of food, right?
Yeah. Obviously.
I mean, what would you do? You know nothing about weightlifting. All you can see is that TV, right? And it's showing you what snatches are. It's showing people snatching over and over and over. So basically, you have to figure out how to snatch, and you have to get to X number weight, whatever that is, in 12 weeks. So, I mean, what would you do?
If it were me, I would watch those videos and learn how to snatch and try to get as much weight as I can.
Right. So, I mean, you know, I've asked a ton of people this, and they all answer like, well, I would snatch because you don't know anything else except for what's on that TV. And I say, well, how many days a week would you snatch? You have 12 weeks to get to whatever the weight is. They say, well, I'd snatch every day because it would be so consuming my brain that I wouldn't not be able to train. Like, I mean, how could you sit there and know that it's a life or death situation and not train? And I say, well, how many times would you train a day? Would you train every day? And would you train 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 5 times a week? And they pretty much all say every day. And they say multiple times a day, you know, they would try. And then I said, if you got close to your target weight and you were missing the weight, like, over and over, how many times would you continue to take it? And it's like, I would keep taking that weight. It's intuitive. You already know how to be great if you're asked the right question.
You just gotta try. You just gotta work at it.
But the point being is, like, if you know nothing about weightlifting and all you saw was someone snatching, then that's the only exercise you would do to get better at snatch. And you would probably get significantly better because it's kind of like a life or death situation. There's a very famous, motivational speech. And, you know the one I'm talking about where he's talking about air?
Oh yeah. What's that?
So the guy, there's a very successful business owner and there's someone who wants to learn how to make a lot of money. And he says, if you want to learn how to make a lot of money, meet me at 5 a.m. on the beach. And so the guy comes to the beach and he says, okay, I'm ready to learn. You know, he's dressed up in a suit and tie and all that stuff. And then he says, okay, well, in order to learn how to make $1 million, you have to go in the water. So anyways, he ends out, he walks in the water. Eventually, maybe he takes off his suit, whatever. He walks in the water, he's waist deep, and he says, you have to get deeper. And then he says, you have to get deeper, and then he's like neck deep. And he says, you have to get deeper, and he pushes his head under the water, and he holds him there, you know, for like 30, 40 seconds. So at this point, the guy's drowning. And he's fighting, you know, he's going crazy trying to get to air. And then so finally after a while the guy lets him up and he says, what are you doing? That's crazy. You almost killed me. And he said, well, if you want to be great at anything, you have to want it as much as you wanted air when you were down there drowning.
Yeah, I just found the video on my phone. It's just go to YouTube and type in how bad do you want success?
Yeah, I mean, it's an awesome video because the guy's drowning and he's saying, like, the only thing that you are thinking about is air. You're not thinking about drinking with your friends the night, you know, that night. You're not thinking about hanging out or any other distractions. You're not thinking about anything except for getting air because that's the only thing that matters because in order to have life, you need to get that air.
Yeah, and that's a really, really important message if you want to be good at anything, regardless if it's, weightlifting, work, relationships, whatever. It's how bad do you want to be good at it?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can't have distractions. And in this situation, if you were on an island, it's obviously hypothetically impossible for this situation to take place, right? But in this situation, it would be life or death. You would need to snatch that weight just as much as you would need air if you're drowning. Because it's life or death. You're going to run out of food. You have to do it. There's no choice. So your approach would be very aggressive. You would go for it, and you would fight.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest issues for weightlifting in the U.S. is just distractions.
Yeah, but that's one of the things. So maybe that particular scenario might change your perception a little bit, but at the same time, we talked about culture. So in the U.S., we have a culture where we have to keep a kid interested, or an adult, whoever has decided to lift. We have to keep them interested because there's a million other things they can do.
Yeah, how many people want to, spend an hour and a half or 2 hours in the gym just doing the same 3 to 4 exercises every other day?
3-4 hours a day. It varies. Some days are shorter than others, but
even if you're talking about just teaching a new person how to lift.
But if you really, really needed it, you would spend a lot of time training. Now, so in our culture, people have to choose weightlifting. We can't force them to do it. Oftentimes, it's a downgrade in life, right?
It's not as glamorous as other things you can do.
At least on paper.
Yeah.
I love what I do, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. But at least on paper, I could be making a salary. I could be, living the American dream in quotes, what people view the American dream as. But would it be my dream? Not really.
Not interested in that white picket fence with 2.5 kids or whatever the corny saying is.
Don't get me wrong. I want a house with a fence and some kids and a dog or whatever. But as of right now, I'm happy doing what I'm doing because I love this sport, but I chose it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't forced on me. So I do have a backup plan, and maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe that makes me not need it, but at least if you think about these things, you can try to incorporate the mindset a little bit more, as long as you're aware of them.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having a backup plan, but it just comes back down to that same thing of how bad you want it.
Yeah. If you have a backup plan, you have something to fall back on. If you didn't have a backup plan, you might need it a little more. But at the same time, so basically,
that kind of, the whole backup plan thing, kind of what we were talking about just a minute ago before we started was about, culture in China where they're looking for some of their athletes in maybe some of the poorer parts of the country and they reward the family, the parents for letting the kid become a part of this, the sport. So like say weightlifting. Right. And the kid is, in training and, a couple years down the road, it's very dishonorable to stop doing what you're doing because it's not just you kind of benefiting from it, but your family, especially your parents, are benefiting from it too.
Yeah, they're kind of in a situation where they feel like they need it. But at the same time, so anyways, regardless of that, we can't change that part of our culture.
Yeah.
People are always going to have to choose weightlifting. And I think that's a good thing. I wouldn't want my kid to be forced to go to a sports school. If he wants to do weightlifting, I want him to do weightlifting. If he wants to, do anything in the world, play piano, whatever, I want my kid to pursue their passions. Obviously, I would try to make them like weightlifting, but at the end of the day, in this culture, a capitalistic society, when they have decisions to make and they can choose any number of activities and they might be influenced by their friends, they might choose something else. And as parents in this society, parents are always supportive of what their kids want. If their kids are if you're training kids where you're running them into the ground, having them max out every day right off the bat and doing this and that, they're going to quit because they're going to go home and cry and their parents are going to be like, man, this is brutal. Something is wrong. This is not right.
Yeah, it just, in our society, you have to choose the sport and that's just a real tough thing for some people.
But once you know this, so variation maybe not, so intuitively, everyone says they would snatch and snatch heavy and snatch heavy often in that scenario. So people are good at making snap judgments, and oftentimes they like second guess their judgments, and they're like, there must be more to this. There's more to the puzzle. So at first, that's the intuition, is like, you just need to snatch, and then the longer you're into it, they're like, there must be some secret formula. And then some people just make up stuff to make themselves sound important, like they're the only ones that have the answer. Like, they have the most complicated program in the world, and they calculate it in this extremely crazy way. And so it's easy for them to throw that in front of someone and be like, I'm the only one who knows how to calculate this perfect program. And I mean, that's not necessarily true.
So it's that overthinking concept of blowing something out of proportion when sometimes it's just the simplest answer.
Yeah, so I mean, it is intuitive. However, because our culture is set up in the manner that it is, and people have to choose weightlifting, we can't have them snatching to a maximum all the time, because they don't really need to do it at first until they make that conscious decision that they want to pursue certain goals. So you do have to add some variation for the mental purposes to keep it fun. But is it completely necessary? I don't know, you know? Obviously, some people will need to do things to work on their technique more, because their technique might look like shit, you know?
And they might have just certain issues that advanced lifters don't have. Like, some people may be really weak in the overhead position on the snatch, so they gotta be able to, you know, do some overhead squats just specifically for that, or just do a lot more shoulder accessory work to get strong so they can hold it overhead. Small things like that.
Yeah. There is something kind of interesting. Maybe one of the flaws in weightlifting too here in the U.S. is that there's something called the paradox of choice. When you walk into a store and you see like a million different brands of the same product that have very small variations, or like 100 different flavors, it's actually been shown that people get really stressed out when there's so many choices. And if you make a choice and never second guess that choice, then you are far happier than if you have 100 different decisions and then you make a choice and then you're always second guessing that choice because there are so many other choices. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's the desert island scenario versus having options. So when you're on that desert island, you only have one choice. You got to do it. But you walk in the supermarket and you're just thinking, man, what kind of beer do I want this weekend? And then you go into a real big super Walmart or something. You look at the wide variety of beer you got. It's like, well, I always drink Bud Light, but kind of hear Coors Light's good, and sometimes you just really fret over if you're making the right decision for that weekend.
I mean, I would encourage you guys to actually look at this book. It is a book called The Paradox of Choice, Why More is Less. I'm actually reading it right now. It's fantastic. It's by psychologist Barry Schwartz. Basically, he's saying if you're able to eliminate consumer choices, you can reduce anxiety. So basically, as the athlete, you know, you start out weightlifting, you're with a coach, things are going good, and then all of a sudden you start learning about weightlifting. You start reading more. And then you start questioning your program. Well, so-and-so trains like this, but so-and-so trains like this. I'm more like them. Why am I not doing this sets and reps? And then when you have so many choices, you actually lose your fire about weightlifting because you think there's some secret answer out there. And is it really about the sets and reps, or is it just working hard? Like I said, so many different people train different ways. Like, it doesn't matter what the sets and reps are. Just train for 10 years, do snatch, clean and jerk, and squat variations, maybe some pulls from time to time. I don't care what rep scheme you're using, what percentages you're using. You know, you can use sets of 10, 5, 3, 2, 1, whatever. Just come in and push your limit on some rep range, and you're gonna get better. As long as you train for 10 years, that's what it takes.
It just takes time, and with time, you gotta be patient.
So I think if we're able to reduce the amount of choices, which is never going to happen, but if people at least are aware that this exists, this concept in psychology that having too many choices actually affects someone negatively, and it makes them second guess themselves. Like to improve performance, you have to be like, you have to mentally be there, and you have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to work hard at it without questioning every detail.
Yeah, it's the thing that helped me the most when I first started doing just weightlifting a little over a year ago now, is the Olympic coach back at Ball State. I asked him, like, what should I do? Should I do like this kind of program, this kind of program? And he said, pick a program out, but you gotta stick with it for a while.
Yeah, I mean, people love to program hop, and that's the thing that I'm trying to, like, explain, is don't do that. Pick one, stick with it. If you feel like it's too easy, train harder, that's fine. But don't overanalyze it,
If you've never heard of this principle of training, it's called the overload principle. It's pretty much saying that the body adapts to stress put onto it. And when it comes to weightlifting, you're going to improve, a little bit initially, get a little heavier, snatch, clean jerk, squats, all that stuff initially. And then when you start hitting a rut, it's real easy to say, okay, well, now I got to do something different, because that's kind of how our culture has been raised, saying, like, if this way doesn't work, then obviously you need to try something different. But with weightlifting, you have to push through that rut. You just have to keep working at what program you're set with, regardless of like what style or country origin or whatever it is.
Well, if you do switch programs, at least believe in your change, At least if you are going to switch programs after a certain amount of time, do it for a good reason and justify it to yourself, so that when you switch programs, you're not immediately going to switch again. Like, think about it, prepare your thought process, and decide, hey, this is for me, and go for it and train hard. Don't, like, second guess it all the time if you don't make progress in 2 weeks or a month or 2 months. Like, make a plan, stick with it, and train hard.
And don't be afraid to find someone who's a little bit more experienced than you and ask them questions.
Now, one last thing before we head off for tonight is that because people are able to make decisions quickly, and like, I feel like at seminars, this is not a knock on people, because I love answering questions, and so does everyone else who helps Glenn out with the seminars, but don't be afraid to use your common sense. We get a lot of questions like, what would you do if someone cleans significantly more than they jerk? Would you have them do jerks from the rack? And it's like they've already answered their own question. They already know. You already know the answer to most of the questions you have. Don't be afraid to be confident. You're all smart people. You're able to think about it. And oftentimes, your second part of the question is the answer. They say, if you jerk more than you clean, should you do cleans without jerks? Well, maybe, not all the time, but it certainly wouldn't be bad to try that.
It's just because it's just that same principle you keep going back to, is intuitively you know what to do.
Yeah. And I mean, if you feel like something's going to help you, if you have a hard time breaking the weight off the floor, maybe try some pulls. We may not have certain things in the program that we have for the general person, but the program that we tell people about at the seminars is adjustable, And so using your common sense and your intuition, most of you already know the answers and how to alter the program for yourself. So be confident, trust in your abilities, and try it out. The only way that you get good as an athlete or coach is to try things out for yourself, because we can tell you things all day long, and we can tell you what we believe, but if you don't believe in it, you're not going to work that hard at it. And if you don't figure it out for yourself, it's easy to forget. Once you teach yourself something, or able to give yourself the cue for a certain issue, or, you decide, you start thinking for yourself, and you become empowered, I mean, that's when you're going to succeed, because you're truly going to believe in your own abilities, and you're going to believe in what you're doing because you had input in it.
That's a really good message, is just believe in what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you guys already know how to be great. Use your brains and trust yourself a little bit. And what's the worst thing that happens? It doesn't work, then change it after a couple weeks, But anyways, I guess we got to get out of here. Now, tweet us at WLifting Scoop. Also, there's, like I said, there's a series of blogs. We talked about some of the particular things that are gonna appear in the blogs, have already appeared, might appear later, in a very brief way. But check it out. There's 3 parts of the series already, and there's probably gonna be more than 10. So we're gonna go into how to coach the beginner, intermediate, and advanced lifter next. And so look out at that at theweightliftingscoop.com. And email us with your questions, We'll answer your questions on here, theweightliftingscoop@gmail.com, or you can tweet them as well. Matt, you got anything?
Yeah, I need some more followers. I'm trying to beat Tom on followers for Twitter and Instagram. So follow me at MattyIce230 on my Twitter, and then same thing, MattyIce230 MDUSA on Instagram. And I'm I guess I'm starting out my own little clinic and seminar business, but it's pretty much the same thing as what we just talked about here, going out and giving people the tools they need to get better and just help with themselves. So if you got a gym or just want some help, just send me a message on one of those sites.
Yeah, and Matt also, you did some bodybuilding and general, like obviously you have a master's degree in strength and conditioning. So outside of weightlifting, you can also help people with their goals.
Yeah, whatever your goal is, I'd like to think I'm pretty well versed in helping out with that. So whatever your goals are,
yeah, well-rounded in the field.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing. I'm looking for some new online programming clients. And so basically where I Skype with the lifter, we come up with a plan that they believe in, and then we go forward. So, kind of the same thing. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Hope you like this topic and check out those blogs.